The workhouse was one of the hallmarks of Victorian Britain. In an era before the welfare state, it was home to the poor and unemployed who had nowhere else to turn. But to stop it being used as an easy option, the workhouse was designed to be an experience people dreaded.
Anyway, Mary, thank you for being such a brave woman.
This much-feared institution didn't finally shut its gates until 1948. In just over 100 years, 16 million people had passed through its doors. These were the massed ranks of Britain's underclass, the unemployed and homeless, segregated and stigmatized by a society which regarded poverty as a crime.
It's really bad. I know. It's really bad.
1 in every 10 people in Britain today has a family connection to this notorious institution through a direct relative.
I think a lot of things were not told to me because she was either ashamed or embarrassed. Oh dear.
To keep out the undeserving poor, in today's terms, benefit scroungers, workhouse life was made so harsh that only the desperate would consider going there.
Within 4 years, they're sending these people in front of machine guns to fight a war for them on their behalf.
But as the workhouse moved into the 20th century, its original mission to punish the poor was replaced by new ideas about social welfare. Workhouse inmates now had the chance to start afresh with renewed hope and meaning.
My mother would have been 2.
Right.
So he would have seen his granddaughter.
Yes, yes.
Actor Brian Cox and novelist Barbara Taylor Bradford will discover how their families eventually escaped the workhouse. And actress Felicity Kendal will trace her family's workhouse secret from tragedy to triumph in the face of overwhelming odds.
That's mind-bending. Well done, Bert, little boy. Fantastic.
The Victorians were people of high moral principle, God-fearing and Christian. To them, the workhouse was not just a place for the poor and the helpless, it was also where social outcasts ended up when they fell foul of this highly ordered society. Actress Felicity Kendal's great-grandmother, Mary Liddell, had little choice but to go to the workhouse when she broke this strict moral code.
I believe this house has something to do with my great-grandmother, of whom I know nothing.
Yes, your great-grandmother, Mary Liddell, did in fact live here. And she would have actually been in this very room at some point where we are now sat. Well, we do know that she married in 1880 to a chap called John Liddell.
Yes, the only photograph that I have of my great-grandparents is of John.
Felicity's great-grandparents, John and Mary, set up home in the Cumbrian town of Dalton-in-Furness. During 18 years of marriage, they successfully raised 9 children together. But in 1898, at the age of 41, Mary gave birth to a 10th child, Albert, and everything changed.
1898, Albert Edward Liddell. You can see where he was born, in the workhouse.
Life in the Victorian workhouse was defined by hardship, strict discipline, and a rigid and oppressive social order. But if you'd like your history with a bit more fun and far fewer rations of gruel, then we've got something for you. Heroes of History. Heroes of History is a free-to-play mobile game available on all devices. You can grow your very own city from a simple Stone Age settlement into a thriving metropolis, with the help of some of history and myth's greatest heroes. We're talking legendary military commanders such as Leonidas, iconic queens like Elizabeth I, and brilliant scientists like Marie Curie. Success in battle depends on using the right heroes at the right time, with each having their own classes, colours, abilities, and roles in battle. Plus, with over 70 heroes to recruit, there's loads of room for experimentation and plenty for your inner history nerd to get excited about. What's more, Heroes of History is constantly being updated, with new heroes, events, mini-games, and features being added every month. Download Heroes of History for free by clicking the link in the description. Now, back to the video.
Why would you go from a family where you had all those children and a lovely husband called John to suddenly having your baby on the floor in a workhouse, or not necessarily on the floor?
I think the answer lies in this box, which tells us the name and surname of the father.
Yes.
It's blank. He's illegitimate.
Oh my goodness me. So then he would he have thrown her out then, probably?
It would appear that John was not happy.
Having become pregnant by an extramarital affair, Mary joined the thousands of other disgraced women forced to give birth in the workhouse because of the social stigma of illegitimacy. Some workhouses even had special uniforms for these women, waspish yellow and black stripes, calculated to shame them and to warn others to avoid them. Albert was one of 7,000 children born illegitimately every year in workhouses, people who would forever have to live with the stigma of starting life on the lowest rung of society. But soon after Albert was born, Mary managed to escape the workhouse and get a job as a maid, here at High Force Forge. She and little Albert shared the attic dormitory with 5 other staff.
Goodness gracious. There's no space at all, and the windows are just, they're on the floor. And little Albert would have looked out onto that exact site of the trees and the snow at some point. And this would have been his first home. It must have been absolutely magical. It's like a little doll's house for a boy who all he knew was the workhouse. To come here, it must have been a little bit like a sanctuary in a sense, you know, a sanctuary of escape. And his mother must have thought, OK, now there is hope.
But this sanctuary would be all too short. Soon after Albert's 3rd birthday, there was a knock on the door, and government officials arrived to take the 1901 census.
Now, sometimes the mistakes on a census can tell us even more information than the information which has been put in. Yeah. Now, if we have a look here, we have Mary Little, where she's down as a servant, age 44, and we look at her condition of marriage. Now, there's a very big capital M there, which means married. But beneath that, there is W-I-D.
Widow.
Widow. Now, it would appear that she initially told somebody she was a widow.
Why?
Being a woman on her own, with quite obviously an illegitimate child, would have had great social stigma. What sometimes happened is the women passed themselves off as widows.
Yes.
Say, oh, my husband died, that's why he's not with me. The rather horrifying possibility is that when she applied for this job here, she told them she was a widow. Then when the census comes to be filled in, somebody said, well, actually, she's not a widow. Her husband lives down the road. This might have been her undoing. Because we do know at some point after 1901, she ended up back in the workhouse again. And that little M there might have caused it.
Oh, my goodness me.
In 1901, Queen Victoria died, and the Edwardian era began. The Victorian workhouse had become an institution with a toxic reputation. Like ex-prisoners, former workhouse inmates faced prejudice and mistrust when they came out and tried to get on with their lives. In Ripon, North Yorkshire, Barbara Taylor Bradford's grandmother, Edith Walker, was an inmate of the local workhouse. Like Mary Little, she also went in to give birth illegitimately. Now, Barbara is trying to find out how Edith and her children, including Barbara's mother, Frida, managed to get out. She's examining the workhouse registers.
They record when individuals and when families were admitted into the workhouse and also when they left.
So many names, so many people
I know.
passed into that place.
It makes you realise, doesn't it?
Oh, Oh. Walker Frida, my mother. Oh, my.
Barbara has found her mother's name, along with those of her mother's siblings.
Edith, Frida, Fred and Mary. They were all there.
All there, yes.
Oh, how awful for them. And how long were they there?
To find out when they left, we have to look at the pages
the
on
page.
this side. Yes.
Here, Walker, Edith, October the 15th, Saturday, last meal before discharge would be beef for breakfast.
That's right.
What's
There's a
this?
nice observation here. It says to be married to
John Simpson.
J. Simpson.
And that's why she came out of the workhouse.
Right.
It's very touching. He must have been a good man. He took on 3 children, as well as my grandmother. Well, that really solves the problem, doesn't it?
Barbara's grandmother Edith and her illegitimate children left the workhouse on October the 15th, 1910. That very day, they all walked around the corner to Ripon Cathedral, where Edith married John Simpson. But this wasn't quite the happy ending it appeared to be, and before long, Barbara's family would find themselves back at the workhouse gates. The workhouse was designed to provide food, shelter, and basic health care for the innocent poor, whilst putting off the idle poor from using it as a soft option. But by the beginning of the 20th century, it had become a victim of its own success. The pauper inmates were now almost exclusively the old, the young, and the sick. Actor Brian Cox's great-grandfather, Patrick McCann, was an unskilled labourer, an Irish immigrant fleeing from the famine. He had come to Glasgow to find work, but an accident left him disabled and unemployed. Patrick, also suffering from bronchitis, became a familiar face at the workhouse gates. However, the authorities doubted his integrity and branded him a malingerer, someone who was trying to cheat the system.
Malingerers and others of questionable character. Bastards.
Living in Glasgow's poorest districts, Patrick's health got worse and worse until he eventually ended up here at Gartlock Asylum, outside the city. Brian wants to know how Patrick's problems spiraled out of control before he was finally declared insane.
If you look at the illnesses, they're fairly typical. Bronchitis, chronic bronchitis. He has hernia as well, but that's being a labourer on 60 shillings a week. He would not have been able to afford a GP, nor would have been insured for GP care. So the poorhouse was basically his general practitioner care.
So that was like going to the doctors?
Yeah, yeah.
So every time he went to the poor house, it was because he needed some kind of treatment?
That's right.
I mean, if he was ill, and they could diagnose his illness, why did they give him this thing of, that he was a malingerer?
They felt that individuals such as Patrick should have been able to look after themselves better.
What do you think?
Highly unlikely.
Highly impossible.
Specialised medical treatment had to be privately paid for. But in the 1880s, the workhouse introduced professional nursing and separate infirmaries for the poor, developments that formed the bedrock of the modern NHS. But Patrick wasn't seeking help just for himself. His wife had died, making him a single parent in sole charge of his 6-year-old son, Brian's great-uncle, Samuel.
He applied to have Samuel taken into care, but from the records it cleared that they refused in the first instance.
Why would they refuse?
It was not normal to take up a parent's request like that at the time, because that would seem to be that you were giving in to the parent. If they accepted Samuel in, they would probably have thousands of parents trying to bring their children in to be fostered out, which was not their policy.
Is it nowhere taken into account that this boy has lost his mother? His mother's died, and that his father is a single parent?
Not at that time, because there have been many children with either mothers or fathers looking after them, i.e. in single
So who
parent.
was expected to look after them?
His father was expected to look after him.
And also work?
And also work.
He's just emblematic, my great-grandfather, emblematic of an epidemic of poverty. And he's trying to give validity to his life, you see that. You see that he's trying to deal with his son, he's trying to deal with... and his own dignity, you know, this endless attack on your dignity. He just fought the system. He said, no, I'm battling on. So there's something heroic in his story in the end. Sorry, it's very upsetting, this. The man was trying to make sense of it. And I think that's the legacy that he leaves his great-grandchildren, is trying to make sense of it.
As the 20th century unfolded, the workhouse began to take on a more caring role, especially with regard to the welfare of the young. The Victorian image of Oliver Twist and child labour was replaced by the Edwardian ideal of Peter Pan, a model of childhood innocence we would all recognise today. The workhouse was given new powers to adopt children it deemed at risk from unsuitable parents, even if that meant breaking up the family unit. Felicity Kendall's great-grandmother, Mary Liddell, stood accused of squandering her family security by having an extramarital affair. After giving birth to Albert in the workhouse and a brief period of employment, Mary was about to end up there a second time at the age of 45.
Well, I'm quietly dreading the next bit, actually, because I don't know how going back to the workhouse twice can end happily. I don't think the dice are going to roll in her favour, quite frankly.
Mary's workhouse records are kept at the Cumbria Archives in Barrow-in-Furness.
We have a record for her from 1902.
And that's in here, is it?
This is in here.
Little Claude. Who's Claude?
Well, if you follow along...
Born in the house.
Yeah, mother.
Mary Liddell. Illegitimate. And she's had another one. She had another one?
Yes.
Do you know this woman is an extraordinary creature?
I think...
And at her age, Jesus, she's a goer, isn't she? But where's Albert? Shouldn't he be here?
He should.
So where is he?
Well, if we go to the minutes of the Board of Guardians...
Medical officer's report. Recommendation. Albert Edward Liddell, aged 4, be under the control of the Guardians until he attain the age of 18 years.
He's taken into the control of the Guardians.
This is too much to bear.
It's a new practice that has come in. The Board of Guardians is allowed to adopt children that they feel are in danger. Children whose parents have died, children whose parents are in prison, or children whose parents are of a low moral standing. And I really think that they would have tarnished Mary with that brush, whether or not she deserved it. And it's this Victorian ideal that if a woman has an illegitimate child or a child that's the result of adultery, the woman is responsible for the sin.
It's heartbreaking.
In 1902, Albert was taken into the custody of the workhouse in Ulverston in Cumbria. Previously, only orphans and abandoned children had been adopted by the Guardians. Now, any vulnerable child could be forcibly removed from its parents and taken into care. That year, there were over 7,000 children like Albert in workhouses across the country. The earliest examples of a child welfare policy we still have today. At Ulverston, Albert was housed in a special children's block and segregated from the adult inmates. including his mother. 12 months after he was taken into care, Mary applied to the Guardians to try to take Albert back.
This is July 1903. So this is a year after Albert's been adopted.
The application of Mary Little for her son Albert, who had been adopted by the Guardian, been not granted. Oh dear, this is getting grimmer by the minute, isn't it? So Albert, at this point, she cannot have back.
No, she's lost all parental right to him.
Yes. Albert, little Albert. And he was, how old was he now then?
He would have been almost 5, I think.
Almost 5.
In Scotland, a different type of childcare scheme was being tried. Rather than raising pauper children inside the workhouse, they were fostered out to new families far away, offering them the chance of a new life. Brian Cox's great-grandfather, Patrick McCann, sought to have his son Samuel fostered out. He was initially refused. When Samuel was 10, the authorities relented and agreed to send him to a family in Ayrshire. The farmstead Samuel lived in is now derelict.
So where have you brought me now?
This is where Samuel would have been boarded out, fostered out to this farmstead here. As you can see, it's a far cry from Glasgow and the Cacaddens and Barnhill.
You can actually see the sky here a wee bit.
Well, this is actually the Doon Valley.
Oh, this is Burns. We're right in there. This is your banks and braes of Bonnie Doon.
Well, you can see
How can you bloom so fresh and fair?
You can see the banks and braes here very easily. And this would be the suit of clothing, the set of suits of clothing he'd be issued with. And then each year he was here to get another new set of clothing, and it would enable him to be otherwise indistinguishable from any local boy. The last thing they would want to do would be to make him appear a pauper in this particular area and perhaps be called
So a lot of
names.
this, I have to admit, there's quite a bit of care has gone into this.
Yes.
Just when you're about to write somebody off, you just suddenly see something like this, which is very dear. So would these be the dwelling houses?
Yes. These would be the farmstead dwelling houses where farm servants and their families would live.
And he would be with the farm servants?
He would be with a farm servant, yes. By coming here, Samuel could start a new life, very distant from his life in the slums.
We've spent 4 years since he first went into the poorhouse with his father. And it's taken Patrick all that time to convince these people to put his boy into care.
Yes.
It's the fact that he just persisted, he just went on, you know. It's heartening. He got his lad out of it.
Samuel was one of over 6,000 children to be fostered out to families in Scotland every year. With a strong tradition of community welfare, Scottish children were able to start new lives, free from the weight of poverty. The success of bringing up children in crofters' cottages like these led to the scheme being adopted in England at the end of the 19th century, paving the way for the modern foster home system. Meanwhile, an even more radical child welfare policy was gaining momentum, to send poor children to the other side of the world. In Ripon, North Yorkshire, Barbara Taylor Bradford is in the town hall trying to find out what happened to her family after they left the workhouse. Her grandmother, Edith, married John Simpson in 1910, and they went on to have 3 children together. 14 years later, those same children, Barbara's mother's siblings, would also end up in Ripon Workhouse.
Here, Norman Simpson, Simpson Francis, Simpson Edith.
All 3 children were admitted on the same day, the 22nd of December, 24.
1924?
Yes.
My grandmother was dead.
Was dead.
So what happened to Mr. Simpson? Was he dead or alive, or?
No mention of him coming in.
Simpson. Here we go. Simpson Norman, Simpson Francis, Simpson Edith, and they all left at the same time, discharged into care of NSPCC. What does that say?
It says for removal.
Removed to Dr. Bernardo's home.
Yes.
The National Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children had been given statutory powers in 1889 which allowed them to take vulnerable children into care. Using these powers, they plucked the Simpson children from Ripon Workhouse and placed them in the custody of Dr. Bernardo's, a private charity established to look after orphaned and abandoned children. And Barbara is writing to see if they can shed any light on what happened to her mother's brothers and sisters. In Cumbria, Felicity Kendall's great-grandmother Mary Little had to give up her son Albert to the workhouse when she was pregnant with another child, Claude. Having lost Albert to the system, Mary then lost Claude when he died of diarrhea aged 18 months, a common cause of infant death amongst the poor. Claude would have been Felicity's great-uncle. He is buried in Ulverston Cemetery.
Is that the number of the grave?
The grave number's 344A. Just I line them up using those headstones there, and it's in this area.
Oh, my goodness.
With there not being a headstone, it's difficult to identify it precisely on the ground. Can I leave you at the graveside?
Yes, yes. I wouldn't do flowers, because I'm Jewish, so I'm just going to lay some stones. There's your view, little Claude. Oh, dear, oh, dear. Well, I think the thing about Mary, one of the things that I'm taking away from her story, is that it was tragic, and this obviously is the ultimate tragedy. But having buried little Claude, she may have been grateful that at least Albert was safe, and that he would be looked after. But I don't know. You know, the other way you would react as a mother is, oh my goodness, what if he's ill? And I can't be there to hold his hand and mop his brow.
The authorities prevented Mary from seeing Albert again. She moved to another workhouse and disappeared from his life. Albert stayed in Ulverston Workhouse until he was 16 years old. With no known family to go to, he faced the issue of what to do with the rest of his life. The stigma of the workhouse meant that Albert had limited job opportunities in the world outside. So, in 1915, he followed the example of thousands of other workhouse boys and enlisted to join the army. Back in Yorkshire, Barbara Taylor Bradford is with her husband, Bob. Dr. Bernardo's have responded to her letter of inquiry.
Oh, well, this is interesting. It's from Dr. Bernardo's. Let me see what is here. I can't work. Oh, it's all about, I saw names of my mother's brothers and sisters. All right.
Good. Go ahead, son.
Frida's mother married John Thomas Simpson, and he is stated in the records to be often unemployed and a drunk. Well, she didn't obviously have good taste in men. Following the mother's death, the children were grossly neglected. When an NSPCC inspector visited the family, they found the children to be in a dirty and verminous condition.
Oh, God.
The children were twice admitted to Ripon Workhouse, and Simpson was later fined £5 for their neglect. In February 1925, Simpson was serving a 3-month prison sentence for their further neglect. Not a happy story at all. No wonder I was never told this story by my mother. Following their admission to Barnardo's on 30th of May 1923, they were migrated to New South Wales in Australia.
Barbara's aunts and uncles were sent to the colonies as part of a wider scheme that dated back to the 1700s to resettle poor children thousands of miles away from their parents and the roots of poverty. In Scotland, Patrick McCann's youngest son, Samuel, was living with foster parents in Ayrshire, almost 100 miles away from his father and home city of Glasgow. Patrick also had two grown-up sons. They too had left Glasgow and moved to Dundee on the east coast of Scotland, leaving Patrick alone in his battle against chronic illness and poverty. As a disabled man with no family support, Patrick had not only given his last child, Samuel, over to care, he'd also given up his rights as a parent.
Glasgow liked to foster well away from Glasgow city itself. And the reason for that was quite simple. It did not want the parent to suddenly turn up. And in fact, it would not tell the parent where their child was fostered.
So they didn't know where their child was?
No.
So we imagine that when Patrick said goodbye to Samuel,
yes,
there was the distinct possibility in Patrick's brain that he was never going to see him again?
That's right, yes. He might never see him again because...
And equally the little boy would feel the same?
Probably feel the same. If he knew what was happening, he'd probably feel, well, that might be the last time I see my father and my brothers.
And your brother.
That's
scary.
The assumption was that he'd stay with his foster parents till he became of age 14.
Do we know what happened to him? We
know that he went to reside with his brothers in Dundee.
So he went to Dundee. Yeah, see,
And more than that, we know that his father turned up in Dundee, and that's the last recorded occasion we have.
So
when
Patrick Senior actually got to Dundee?
Yes. We know that all the three brothers were residing in Dundee in 1908, and their father came to see him. And that's the last recorded occasion when we see in these records the family being together, the father with these three boys.
1908?
1908, for at least a month.
Clearly they made an effort to get back together as a family. But no women, you see. That's the problem. Except 1908.
Yes.
Oh, my God. My mother would have been 2.
Right.
So he would have seen his granddaughter.
Yes, yes. So he'd have seen his daughter-in-law and his granddaughter.
Oh.
And you can see they're all residing at the same address in Lochee, Dundee.
That's incredible, because I had it in my mind that he was on his own and he... Yeah, he was seeing his wee granddaughter. She would have been 2.
Three years after being reunited with his sons and meeting his baby granddaughter, Patrick died of pneumonia. He was just 54 years old.
It's an amazing story, but it's also a testimony to a whole time and period and a group of people who are not taken care of and have never been taken care of. We've never really dealt with our poor. From generation to generation, these situations teach you that the only way is this sense of our responsibility for one another. That's the only way. And if we don't have that sense of responsibility for one another, our world is chaos.
By 1914, the Workhouse authorities had succeeded in creating a generation of fit and healthy young men out of pauper children. Stigmatized and unwanted, the obvious place for boys brought up in one institution was another one: the army. Now the moment had arrived for them to come forward in their country's hour of need, as they volunteered in their thousands to fight in the First World War. Amongst these Workhouse recruits was Felicity Kendall's great-uncle, Albert Liddell.
So we know he enlisted in 1915, and in 1916 he was sent to the front, and he was sent to Ypres just on the eve of the second big battle there, which was slaughter. He was very lucky. He had just come from training in the UK, and he didn't see action straight away, but then he did see a lot of very significant action after that. So, I mean, he must have had a bit of a charmed life to get through all of that.
That's extraordinary. But that's a miracle that he wasn't wounded.
He's extraordinarily lucky.
And what is this?
That's just the record of his service. It shows that he got the British War Medal, Victory Medal. It's not a decoration for honour, it's just a kind of, I was there.
Yes, but it is nice to have.
You know,
I mean,
well
that's
done.
huge.
We're
That
pleased
is
to have you.
huge. That is huge to have something written down that says this is what you've achieved. That must have given him quite a...
Yeah. I mean, for a
boost.
pauper child from the workhouse to have served, to have survived, to have received a medal. Having a medal, this must have been the first time in Albert's life that anyone had ever said to him, you're special. And it might have meant that when he came home, people saw him differently.
I think that would have made all the difference in the world to him.
Yeah.
Extraordinary.
After the First World War, the government offered Albert and all other returning soldiers free passage to Australia. The post-war economy in Britain was in recession, and for a workhouse child, emigration offered the chance to build a new life free from the stigma of pauperism. 17,000 ex-soldiers took up the offer to establish themselves as colonists and pioneers. Albert left for Australia in 1922. Barbara Taylor Bradford's mother's siblings all ended up in the colonies as well, but they didn't volunteer. They were sent there by Dr. Barnardo's, having originally been taken into the care of the workhouse. Barnardo's was one of a number of charitable organisations who, backed by the British government, took pauper children and forced them to migrate to the other side of the world. The last one of Barbara's family to leave England was the youngest of her aunts and uncles, little Edith. By now, Barbara's mother, Frida, was married and working as a nurse in Leeds.
Bob, now look, this is from my mother.
Dr. Barnardo's have sent copies of letters they exchanged with Frida.
Dear Madam, she's writing to Barnardo's. I write to you to ask you if you can give me any information concerning my youngest sister by name Edith Simpson. She was taken into one of your homes when she was a small child, between 5 and 7 years. Oh, how sad. She didn't know where her little sister was. Now, here is the reply. Dear Madam, your sister Edith went out to Australia with one of our parties in April 1928. And Edith is extremely happy and is getting on nicely out there. The principal says that Edith has good reports all around. Dear Miss Picton Turberville, she now has a name, it has taken a great load off my mind to know little Edith is still alive and doing so well. I am so glad to know that. Oh, she may have thought she was dead.
Yes.
But now I am happily married and have a nice cottage of my own in a nice part of the city. I have been hoping that I might be allowed to bring Edith to live with me, as I could take good care of her now. Oh, she wanted a sister. I want to ask this one favour of you. Do you think she would be allowed to come home and let me have her to live with me? Oh, she wanted her little sister, didn't she? Please don't think me selfish. Sorry. Please don't think me selfish wishing to have her now when you have cared for her and educated her and brought her up to be such a good girl. But it is just the longing for my own people. My mother must have longed. She says it, my own people.
Yes, of course. It's tragic, this whole thing.
Dear Mrs. Taylor, I write to say that I am afraid we could not bear the expense of bringing Edith back to England, even if it were decided it would be well for her to return. I am not quite clear from your letter when you say that you would like to bring her back, whether it would be possible for you to pay the expense involved. Now this is going to throw you. Which would be from £32 to £36. But they didn't,
expense.
But they didn't have it, Mummy and Daddy.
They
didn't have that kind of money to spare.
She was a good woman.
Well, that I know. She really was.
In total, 150,000 children were sent overseas under the scheme. The last of them left Britain as recently as 1967. Since then, there has been official acknowledgement of the cruelty of this forcible migration policy. In 2010, Prime Minister Gordon Brown formally apologized to all those families who had been affected. Frida died without ever seeing her sister again. Bernardo's last known record of Edith was that she was still living in Western Australia in 1937. Felicity Kendall's great-uncle, Albert, made the most of his opportunity in Australia and ended up owning his own farm.
The first record we have is this one, his certificate of marriage. He married Rachel, an Australian woman.
Rachel, my favourite name. What I'd love to know, was he called Billy?
He was called
Bob.
Bert.
Bert?
Bert. They called him Bert.
Oh, Bert.
And he's listed as a farmer.
And Mary is there as his mother and father. Oh, my goodness, he's got John Little there.
It's amazing, isn't it?
John Little was Mary's husband, the man who threw her out when she became pregnant illegitimately with Albert.
He lists John Little as his father.
That's mind-bending. He has joined his family together. He's got John and he's got his mother on the same piece of paper that he is on, and he's sort of legitimised himself. And I think that is one of the incredibly important things in this story, is that he's come from nothing, totally legitimate and the bottom of the heap and not respectable. And he ends up with respectability.
Yeah. There is one other thing that we know about his relationship with the family back in England, and this is his will.
Oh my goodness. Oh, he had an awful lot of money. 4,000 to Janet Little Waring, usually known as Jenny Little Waring. But who is that?
So this is his half-niece. We don't know what kind of relationship there was here, but clearly he knew his family and he knew the next generation. He must have made contact with John and his family. Now, we don't know how that happened. I suspect it might have been when he comes back from the war, because the war really did change things. Maybe his family had decided that, you know, after the horrors of war, Albert, or Bert, meant something different to the family now, because he was a decorated war veteran. You know, he'd come back with the Victory Medal, and he had served and survived. Maybe they felt that they could now acknowledge him. After all this history of secrecy and, you know, lies, infidelity, betrayal, you know, Albert had made peace with it, that he had made peace with his family. He died a successful man, really.
What a wonderful story.
Emotionally and financially. Yes.
Well done, Bert. Little boy. Fantastic.
The early Victorian pioneers of the workhouse viewed poverty as a crime. But as the 20th century unfolded, there was a growing sense that it was a social problem, which could only be treated by showing greater compassion. In this new world order, the idea of a deterrent workhouse looked increasingly outdated. Over time, many of its functions had been discharged to specialized institutions like pauper schools and free hospitals for the poor, as a new model of social welfare began to take shape. In 1929, the workhouse was formally abolished by an Act of Parliament, although it took almost 20 years to phase out altogether. With the introduction of the NHS in 1948, the last workhouse shut up shop as its remaining functions were absorbed into the welfare state. Today, almost all physical traces of the institution have been covered up or erased. But its shadow, nonetheless, falls over millions of people whose lives have been touched by their families' secrets from the workhouse.